The sun climbed slowly above endless forests where giant ferns stretched toward the sky and ancient trees formed green cathedrals that no human architect could ever imagine. Mist floated over rivers as enormous dragonflies danced through the humid air. Every sound carried meaning. The distant roar of a predator warned every living creature to remain alert. The calls of giant herbivores echoed across the valleys like moving thunderstorms. The earth itself seemed alive because every step of a massive dinosaur made the ground tremble beneath the feet of every smaller animal. This was the dinosaur age. It was a world of astonishing beauty and constant danger where survival depended on intelligence, courage, and respect for nature. Although history tells us that humans and dinosaurs never truly lived together, the stories passed from generation to generation often imagined another possibility. In those legends, small groups of people wandered through the vast wilderness, learning to survive among creatures that seemed like living mountains. These humans did not build great cities or kingdoms. They lived in simple shelters made from wood, leaves, and stone. Fire was their greatest treasure because it provided warmth, light, protection, and hope during the endless nights when unseen eyes watched from the darkness beyond the camp. Life demanded endless work. Every sunrise began with a search for clean water. Edible plants, fruit, fish, and small animals. Hunting large dinosaurs was almost impossible. Instead, people depended on teamwork to trap smaller prey or gather enough food to keep the tribe alive. Children learned important lessons from their elders long before they became adults. They learned how to recognize dangerous footprints. They learned which plants healed wounds and which could bring death. They learned to read the wind because a sudden change in its direction could carry the scent of a hungry predator toward the camp. The beauty of the world was impossible to ignore. Flowers of brilliant colors covered open fields after heavy rain. Waterfalls poured from cliffs into crystal-clear lakes surrounded by enormous cycads and towering conifers. At dawn, peaceful herds of long-necked dinosaurs crossed the plains with slow and graceful movements. Watching these gentle giants reminded people that not every enormous creature was an enemy. Some were simply travelers searching for fresh leaves beneath the endless blue sky. Yet fear was never far away. Carnivorous dinosaurs ruled many regions. Their sharp senses allowed them to detect movement from incredible distances. Even the strongest hunter knew that bravery alone could never defeat such creatures. Wisdom mattered far more than strength. A careless decision could cost an entire tribe its future. Every campfire story carried the memory of someone who had underestimated the wild. Among one small tribe lived a young man named Kale. Unlike many hunters, he spent more time observing than fighting. He believed every creature followed patterns that could be understood. While others celebrated successful hunts, Kale watched dinosaur migrations, studied their behavior, and remembered every path they traveled. Some elders admired his patience. Others believed he wasted valuable time. Kale remained silent because he trusted that knowledge would one day become the tribe's greatest weapon. One evening the sky turned deep orange as enormous shadows crossed the horizon. Hundreds of herbivorous dinosaurs moved together across the valley in a migration unlike anything the tribe had ever witnessed. Birds filled the air above them while smaller animals hurried behind the gigantic herd, feeding on insects and plants disturbed by their passage. The entire landscape transformed into a moving river of life. Even the oldest members of the tribe stood speechless before such a magnificent sight. As darkness arrived, distant roars echoed through the mountains. The peaceful migration had attracted powerful predators. Kale noticed fresh footprints surrounding the valley and understood something the others had not yet realized. The hunters were no longer the only observers. Somewhere beyond the trees, intelligent predators were patiently waiting for the perfect moment to attack. The balance between beauty and danger had begun to shift. And the peaceful world the tribe believed they understood was about to reveal its true nature. The first light of dawn spread across the valley as Kale quietly left the sleeping camp to examine the enormous footprints he had discovered the previous evening. The ground was still damp from the night air, allowing every mark to remain perfectly visible. Some tracks belonged to peaceful herbivores that had continued their migration before sunrise, while others belonged to predators that had carefully followed the herd from a safe distance. Kale knelt beside one of the largest prints and noticed that it was deeper than the others, suggesting that the animal carrying it was both massive and healthy. He had learned from years of observation that hungry predators often walked differently from those that had recently eaten. These tracks revealed patience rather than desperation, and that realization worried him more than anything else. A patient hunter rarely made mistakes. He returned to the village and shared his concerns with the elders. Some listened carefully while others insisted that the tribe had survived countless seasons and should not fear every shadow hiding among the trees. Experience had taught them confidence, but confidence could easily become blindness. The tribe prepared for another ordinary day. Women gathered fruits, roots, and medicinal plants near the river. Young hunters repaired stone spearheads while older warriors sharpened heavy wooden spears hardened by fire. Children collected dry branches for the evening fires while listening to stories about ancient spirits said to protect those who respected the forest. Life continued because survival demanded routine even when danger waited nearby. By midday the valley came alive with astonishing beauty. Long-necked dinosaurs slowly reached the tops of ancient trees to feed on fresh leaves while smaller herbivores grazed peacefully across the open fields. Brilliant birds circled above sparkling lakes, and colorful insects covered flowering plants that had grown after several days of warm rain. Kale admired the balance surrounding him. Every creature depended on another in ways that many people never noticed. Fallen trees became homes for insects. Insects fed birds. Birds warned larger animals of approaching predators. Rivers nourished forests, and forests sheltered countless forms of life. The world functioned like an endless chain in which every link mattered. Yet beauty often disguised danger. As the afternoon grew hotter, every bird suddenly became silent. The forest seemed to stop breathing. Kale immediately recognized the warning because silence was often louder than any roar. He climbed a large rock overlooking the valley and searched the distant tree line. At first he saw nothing except gently moving leaves. Then a massive head slowly emerged between towering ferns. Dark eyes scanned the landscape with frightening intelligence. Behind the first predator appeared another, and then a third. They moved with remarkable discipline, spreading apart instead of remaining together. These were not careless beasts driven only by hunger. They hunted with cooperation and patience. Kale hurried back toward the tribe, shouting for everyone to leave the valley before it became a trap. Panic spread through the camp. Families grabbed baskets, tools, blankets, and precious supplies. Hunters formed a defensive line while elders guided children toward a narrow mountain path known only to experienced travelers. Before everyone could escape, the peaceful herd of herbivores suddenly exploded into chaos. Thousands of heavy feet shook the earth as frightened giants ran in every direction. Trees cracked like dry sticks beneath their enormous weight. Dust rose into the sky until the sun itself nearly disappeared behind a gray cloud. The predators had begun their attack. They ignored the humans at first because the massive herd offered easier targets. One gigantic carnivore leaped onto the back of a wounded herbivore with astonishing speed despite its enormous size. The valley echoed with deafening roars, crashing trees, and desperate cries that seemed to shake the mountains themselves. Kale stood frozen for a single moment, overwhelmed by the raw power of nature unfolding before his eyes. He understood that survival in this world depended not on defeating its greatest creatures but on respecting their place within it. As the tribe finally reached the safety of the rocky path, Kale looked back one last time. Beyond the clouds of dust, he noticed something unexpected. A lone child had become separated from the fleeing families and now stood hidden beneath a fallen tree while a predator slowly turned its head in that direction. Without allowing himself another thought, Kale tightened his grip on his spear and ran back into the valley where almost no human willingly entered once death had begun its hunt. Kale sprinted across the trembling ground while the thunder of countless dinosaur footsteps echoed around him like an endless storm. Dust filled the air so heavily that every breath burned his lungs, yet he refused to slow down because the frightened child remained trapped beneath the fallen tree. The enormous predators were focused on the panicked herd, but Kale knew that a single careless movement could draw their attention in an instant. He lowered his body and moved from one broken trunk to another, using the chaos as his only protection. Every heartbeat sounded louder than the crashing forest around him. The child, no older than 8 summers, struggled to remain silent despite tears streaming down his face. One heavy branch pinned his leg against the ground, making escape impossible without help. Kale reached him and immediately began lifting smaller branches away before placing both hands beneath the thick trunk. Every muscle in his body strained as he pushed with all his strength. The wood shifted only slightly, but it was enough for the frightened boy to pull his injured leg free. Kale grabbed the child's arm and urged him toward the narrow path leading into the hills. Before they had taken more than a few steps, an enormous roar shattered the air behind them. One of the great carnivores had noticed their movement. Its golden eyes fixed upon them with terrifying precision, and for a brief moment the entire world seemed to fall silent. Kale knew they could never outrun such a creature across open ground. Instead, he remembered something he had observed many times before. The largest predators often hesitated when forced to move through dense forests where their massive bodies lost speed and visibility. He pulled the child toward a maze of ancient trees where thick roots twisted across the earth like giant serpents. The predator charged forward, destroying bushes and crushing young trees beneath its powerful legs. Birds exploded into the sky as smaller animals scattered in every direction. Kale and the boy squeezed between enormous rocks that formed a narrow passage too small for the giant hunter to enter. The dinosaur slammed against the stone walls, roaring in frustration as pieces of rock tumbled to the ground. For several long moments it searched for another path before finally abandoning the chase to return to the easier prey still struggling in the valley below. Kale remained completely still until every distant roar faded into the forest. Only then did he allow himself to breathe normally again. The boy's leg was bruised and bleeding, but it was not broken. Using leaves from a medicinal plant carried in a small leather pouch, Kale cleaned the wound and wrapped it tightly with strips of woven bark. The child looked at him with gratitude mixed with disbelief, asking why he had risked his own life for someone so young. Kale smiled gently and answered that a tribe survived only when every life mattered. Because strength was measured not by the number of enemies defeated but by the number of people protected. Together they continued climbing toward the rocky shelter where the rest of the tribe had gathered. Relief spread across the faces of the families as they saw the missing child safely return. Mothers embraced their children while elders thanked the spirits they believed had guided Kale through the deadly valley. That evening no songs were sung around the fire. Everyone remained unusually quiet, reflecting upon how quickly peace had transformed into terror. Several hunters admitted they had underestimated the intelligence of the great predators. Even the proudest warriors accepted that courage without wisdom could destroy an entire community. As darkness covered the mountains, Kale climbed alone to a high cliff overlooking the valley. Fires from distant lightning illuminated the horizon while scavengers already circled above the remains of the day's hunt. Nature wasted nothing. Death became life for countless other creatures, continuing the endless cycle that governed the ancient world. While watching the moon rise above the forest, Kale noticed something unusual far beyond the river. Small lights flickered between the trees, moving with purpose instead of drifting like fireflies. They resembled campfires made by human hands. Until that moment the tribe had believed they were alone in this vast land, but somewhere beyond the dark forest another group of people had begun their own journey. And Kale sensed that their meeting would change the future of both tribes forever. The following morning the memory of the previous day's terror still weighed heavily on every member of the tribe, yet curiosity slowly replaced fear inside Kale's mind. The mysterious lights he had seen across the river could not be ignored because no natural fire moved in such an organized pattern. After speaking with the elders, he received permission to investigate, though only after promising to avoid unnecessary risks. 2 experienced hunters volunteered to accompany him, carrying long spears, stone knives, ropes woven from strong plant fibers, and small bags filled with dried meat, berries, and medicinal herbs. Before leaving, the oldest woman of the tribe placed a hand upon Kale's shoulder and reminded him that strangers could become either trusted friends or dangerous enemies depending on the first words they exchanged. Those words remained in his thoughts as the 3 travelers disappeared into the ancient forest. The journey revealed once again both the beauty and the hardship of life during the dinosaur age. Towering trees blocked much of the sunlight, creating cool green corridors where colorful birds sang from invisible branches high above. Crystal streams crossed their path, providing fresh water so clear that fish could be seen gliding between smooth stones. Huge butterflies drifted through patches of wild flowers, and peaceful herbivores quietly fed on leaves without paying attention to the small humans passing nearby. Yet every pleasant sight demanded caution. Venomous reptiles rested beneath fallen logs. Giant insects could deliver painful bites. Thick vines hid deep holes capable of breaking a careless traveler's leg. Every step required attention because the wilderness rewarded patience and punished haste. As the sun reached its highest point, the travelers discovered signs that confirmed another human tribe truly lived nearby. Fresh footprints surrounded a narrow stream. Several trees carried deliberate markings cut into their bark with sharp stone tools. Broken branches had been arranged to point toward hidden paths, allowing those who understood the symbols to navigate safely through the forest. Kale smiled as he studied the marks because they revealed intelligence, planning, and cooperation. Whoever these people were, they possessed knowledge remarkably similar to his own tribe. Late in the afternoon the forest opened into a broad meadow where smoke rose gently above dozens of carefully built shelters. Children laughed while chasing one another between wooden huts. Hunters repaired fishing nets beside the river. Women shaped clay into cooking vessels before placing them near warm fires to harden. Elderly storytellers sat beneath a massive tree surrounded by attentive listeners. The village appeared peaceful but highly organized. Before Kale and his companions could announce themselves, several guards stepped forward carrying polished spears tipped with black volcanic stone. Their faces showed caution rather than hostility. Both groups studied one another in complete silence until Kale slowly lowered his own weapon and raised his empty hands to show peaceful intentions. After several tense moments, the guards responded by lowering their spears as well. A tall woman wearing a necklace carved from polished shells approached the visitors. She introduced herself as Nara, the leader of the Riverside tribe. Her voice remained calm, but her eyes carefully observed every movement made by the strangers. Kale explained where his people lived and described the recent predator attack that had forced them into the mountains. Nara listened without interruption before revealing that her own tribe had witnessed similar changes. The great carnivores had become more aggressive during recent seasons because many herbivores had altered their migration routes after earthquakes reshaped parts of the valley. Food had become less predictable, forcing predators to travel farther than ever before. Humans had also noticed another troubling change. Larger packs of smaller hunting dinosaurs had begun cooperating in ways no elder remembered seeing in earlier years. Survival was becoming more difficult for everyone. As evening settled over the village, the visitors were welcomed beside a large communal fire where both tribes exchanged stories, knowledge, and songs despite speaking with slightly different accents. Kale realized that although people came from different lands, they shared the same hopes, fears, and determination to protect those they loved. The discovery filled him with optimism because cooperation offered possibilities that neither tribe could achieve alone. Yet while laughter briefly returned to the gathering, a deep rumble echoed from the distant hills. Every experienced hunter immediately recognized the sound. It was not thunder. It was the synchronized roar of several large predators calling to one another across the darkness, and this time the voices were far closer to the village than anyone had expected. The joyful conversations around the great fire ended the instant the distant roars rolled across the forest. Every face turned toward the dark tree line, where the last light of the evening disappeared beneath towering ancient pines. Nara immediately gave calm but firm orders to her people. Hunters climbed onto wooden watch platforms built high between enormous trees while others strengthened the thorn barriers surrounding the village. Mothers gathered children into the safest shelters, and elders carried baskets filled with burning branches to every entrance so fresh fires could be lit if danger approached. Kale observed the remarkable discipline with admiration because every person understood exactly what needed to be done without panic or confusion. Years of surviving beside giant predators had taught these people that preparation often meant the difference between life and death. Kale and his companions joined the defenders without hesitation. Although they belonged to another tribe, the threat facing the village belonged to everyone. The night grew unusually quiet after the roars faded. Even the insects stopped singing. A cool wind carried the smell of damp earth mixed with the unmistakable scent of large carnivores. Experienced hunters exchanged worried glances because predators rarely hunted together unless driven by unusual circumstances. Hours passed with nothing more than rustling leaves and the occasional cry of distant birds. Some younger guards began believing the danger had passed. Kale remained alert. He remembered the patient hunters in the valley and understood that true predators often waited until their prey relaxed. Suddenly one of the watchmen shouted from the northern platform. Dark shapes moved silently between the trees. At first only glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, followed by slender bodies covered in rough feathers. They were smaller than the enormous hunters that ruled the valleys, but they moved with frightening speed and intelligence. Instead of charging directly toward the village, they spread apart, searching for weak points in the defensive barrier. Nara whispered that these clever hunters had attacked several nearby camps during the previous season, stealing food and striking isolated travelers before disappearing into the forest. The first creature leaped over the thorn wall with astonishing agility. A spear flew through the air and struck the ground beside it, missing by only a few inches. The animal hissed sharply, signaling the others. Within seconds several more entered the village from different directions. Chaos erupted as hunters rushed to intercept them before they could reach the shelters where families hid. Kale grabbed a burning branch from the nearest fire and swung it toward one of the attackers. The creature immediately retreated, clearly fearing the flames more than the spear in his other hand. Realizing this, Kale shouted for everyone to carry fire instead of chasing the predators through the darkness. Dozens of villagers quickly formed a moving circle of burning torches. Bright flames illuminated the entire settlement, forcing the hunting dinosaurs to hesitate. The creatures darted back and forth, searching for an opening, but every path became blocked by firelight. One particularly bold predator attempted another charge, only to retreat with a loud screech as a burning branch landed directly before its feet. The pack slowly lost its advantage. After several tense minutes the leader released a sharp call, and the animals vanished into the forest almost as quickly as they had appeared. Silence gradually returned, broken only by heavy breathing and the crackling of burning wood. Miraculously no one had been killed, although several hunters carried deep claw wounds that required immediate treatment. As healers cleaned the injuries with crushed herbs and wrapped them with woven bandages, Kale reflected on what had happened. The predators had not attacked out of blind aggression. They had tested the village, searching for weakness, learning how humans defended themselves. That realization troubled him far more than the battle itself. Near midnight, while helping repair the damaged barrier, Kale discovered strange footprints beyond the northern edge of the village. They did not belong to the feathered hunters that had attacked, nor to any giant carnivore he had studied before. The prints were enormous, deeply pressed into the soil, and spaced much farther apart than those of ordinary predators. Whatever had left them possessed extraordinary size and strength. Even more unsettling, the tracks circled the village once before disappearing into the darkness, as though their owner had merely been watching the entire battle from the safety of the forest. Kale stared at the mysterious trail until the moon slipped behind thick clouds, realizing that the night's attack might have been only the beginning of a far greater danger waiting somewhere beyond the ancient trees. The sunrise revealed a forest that appeared peaceful once again, yet no one in the village believed the danger had truly passed. Fresh dew covered the grass, birds returned to their songs, and gentle herbivores wandered along the distant riverbanks as though the violent struggle of the previous night had never happened. Nature possessed an extraordinary ability to erase the visible signs of conflict, but the memories remained alive in every human heart. Kale gathered with Nara and the elders to examine the enormous footprints discovered beyond the northern barrier. Several experienced hunters followed the trail until it reached rocky ground where the prints disappeared, making further tracking impossible. Even the oldest members of the tribe admitted they had never seen marks of such immense size. The mystery created more fear than certainty because an unknown threat could not be predicted. During the council, one elderly hunter named Doran slowly stood and shared a story he had heard from his grandfather many years earlier. According to ancient tradition, a gigantic predator lived high within the northern mountains where thick fog covered the cliffs throughout the year. Few people had ever claimed to see the creature, and even fewer had returned after following its trail. Some believed it was only a legend created to frighten reckless children away from dangerous valleys, while others insisted that every legend contained a small piece of forgotten truth. Doran explained that strange earthquakes, unusual migrations, and increasing predator activity had often been connected in the old stories with the appearance of the mysterious mountain hunter. The gathering fell silent as everyone considered the possibility that the ancient tale might describe a real animal. Kale did not dismiss the legend. He believed that observation mattered more than assumption, and the enormous footprints proved that something extraordinary had indeed passed near the village. After long discussion, both tribes agreed to form a joint expedition into the mountains. Their purpose was not to hunt the unknown creature but to understand why so many changes were spreading across the land. Knowledge, once again, seemed more valuable than violence. By midday a carefully selected group of 12 experienced travelers began the journey north. They carried food, water, stone tools, ropes, medicinal plants, and enough firewood to survive several nights away from the safety of the village. The climb quickly became difficult. Thick forests gave way to steep cliffs where narrow paths wound between enormous boulders. Cold winds replaced the warm air of the valley, and strange plants grew from cracks in ancient stone walls. Along the way they encountered remarkable sights that reminded everyone of the beauty hidden within even the harshest landscapes. Small feathered dinosaurs with brightly colored wings glided effortlessly from cliff to cliff. Crystal waterfalls poured into deep pools so clear that every pebble at the bottom remained visible. Rare flowers bloomed among the rocks despite the harsh conditions, attracting insects unlike any found in the forests below. The mountain seemed both wild and magnificent, rewarding those patient enough to appreciate its wonders. As evening approached, the expedition reached a wide plateau overlooking endless valleys stretching toward the horizon. There they discovered something unexpected. Massive bones lay scattered across the ground, some longer than several grown men standing head to foot. Many showed enormous bite marks carved deep into the ancient skeletons. Whatever predator had fed their possessed unimaginable strength. Nearby, fresh footprints identical to those found outside the village crossed the rocky soil before disappearing into a narrow canyon leading even higher into the mountains. The hunters exchanged uneasy glances but continued forward with determination. Just before sunset a deep vibration passed beneath their feet. Pebbles rolled down the cliffs, birds exploded into the sky, and distant echoes rumbled through the canyon. It was not a simple earthquake. The sound carried rhythm, as though each tremor matched the footsteps of an unimaginably heavy creature walking somewhere beyond the towering walls of stone. The expedition extinguished every torch and remained perfectly still. Then, from the darkness ahead, a gigantic shadow slowly emerged between the cliffs. At first only its glowing amber eyes became visible, reflecting the fading light of the evening. The enormous figure stopped without making another sound and stared directly at the humans from across the canyon. No roar broke the silence. No attack followed. It simply watched them with calm intelligence before turning and disappearing into the mountain mist, leaving Kale with the unsettling realization that they had not found the mysterious hunter by accident. It had allowed itself to be seen. No one moved for several long moments after the gigantic shadow disappeared into the mountain mist. Even the wind seemed unwilling to disturb the silence that had settled over the canyon. Every member of the expedition understood that they had just witnessed something unlike any creature described in the stories of their ancestors. The glowing eyes had not reflected blind aggression or simple animal instinct. They had shown awareness. Kale slowly stepped toward the edge of the canyon and examined the fresh footprints left behind. Each impression was nearly as wide as his shoulders, pressed so deeply into the stone-covered soil that only an animal of extraordinary weight could have created them. Yet despite its massive size, the mysterious predator had approached almost without making a sound. Such a combination of strength and stealth seemed impossible. Nara quietly suggested returning to the village before darkness trapped them among the cliffs, but Kale believed they had already crossed the point where fear could guide their decisions. They had come to understand the changes affecting the land, and turning back now would leave every tribe facing the unknown without answers. After careful discussion, the group agreed to continue at first light while spending the night inside a narrow cave overlooking the canyon. The entrance was easy to defend, and a small spring flowing from the rocks provided fresh water. No large predator could enter without being seen. As darkness covered the mountains, the travelers lit only a single hidden fire whose smoke escaped through a crack in the cave ceiling. They spoke quietly while sharing dried meat and berries. Doran repeated more fragments of the old legends, describing a guardian that appeared whenever the balance of nature was threatened. According to the ancient stories, the giant hunter did not kill without reason. It followed the movements of other predators and appeared wherever disorder spread across the land. Most of the younger hunters dismissed the tale as myth, yet none could explain the calm behavior of the creature they had seen. A true hunter would have attacked while it held every advantage. But instead it had simply observed them before disappearing into the darkness. During the deepest hours of the night, Kale volunteered to keep watch outside the cave. The moon hung above the mountains like a pale stone, illuminating the cliffs with cold silver light. Far below, distant herds crossed the valleys in slow silent lines, their movements resembling rivers flowing across the earth. As Kale watched the peaceful scene, he noticed another unexpected detail. Smaller predators that normally hunted alone now traveled together in unusually large numbers. Packs moved across the plains from different directions, all heading toward the northern mountains. It was as though something invisible was drawing them toward a single destination. Before dawn, the expedition resumed its climb through the narrow canyon. Strange claw marks covered the stone walls, some reaching far above the height of any human. Broken trees lay scattered across the path despite growing from solid rock, suggesting that immense force had passed through the area only days before. Eventually the canyon widened into a hidden valley surrounded by towering cliffs on every side. In the center stood an enormous lake whose surface reflected the morning sky like polished glass. Around its shores grazed countless herbivorous dinosaurs living together in remarkable peace. Species that usually competed for food shared the same meadows without conflict. Predators were nowhere to be seen. The place felt untouched by the violence that ruled the outside world. The travelers remained hidden among the rocks while observing the valley. Suddenly every herbivore lifted its head at exactly the same moment. None appeared frightened. Instead they calmly stepped aside, creating a wide path leading toward the lake. From the dense forest emerged the gigantic predator once again. In the clear daylight its true size became visible. It towered above every creature surrounding it, its powerful body covered in dark scales marked by old scars earned through countless battles. Yet instead of attacking the vulnerable herd, it walked peacefully to the water's edge and drank without disturbing a single animal. The herbivores watched without fleeing, behaving as though they recognized its presence. Kale realized he was witnessing something that challenged everything humans believed about the natural world. At that very moment a deafening roar echoed from the cliffs above. Another enormous predator burst from the rocks and charged toward the peaceful valley with terrifying speed. The giant guardian lifted its head, turned toward the attacker, and answered with a roar so powerful that the entire mountain seemed to shake, signaling the beginning of a battle unlike anything the expedition had ever imagined. The enormous roar rolled across the hidden valley like thunder trapped between the mountains. Every peaceful herbivore immediately began moving toward the edges of the lake, not in blind panic but in an organized retreat that revealed long experience with such moments. Kale watched in amazement as creatures of many different species instinctively created space for the coming confrontation. The giant guardian stepped forward with slow confidence, planting each massive foot firmly upon the ground while keeping its glowing eyes fixed on the newcomer charging down the rocky slope. The invading predator was nearly as large, but its body carried countless fresh wounds and its movements revealed relentless aggression rather than calm strength. Its jaws opened wide, exposing rows of curved teeth that flashed beneath the morning sun. Dust exploded behind every step as it rushed across the valley, determined to overpower anything standing in its path. The guardian remained motionless until the final seconds. Then, with astonishing speed for such an immense creature, it lunged forward and met the attack head-on. The collision echoed through the mountains like two enormous boulders crashing together. The earth trembled beneath the impact. Birds erupted from the surrounding forest while waves spread across the calm lake. Kale and the others could only watch from their rocky shelter, understanding that no human weapon could influence a struggle between such colossal beings. The two giants exchanged powerful bites and crushing blows with their tails. Every movement demonstrated incredible strength, yet there was also intelligence behind each attack. The guardian avoided reckless charges, patiently waiting for openings before striking with precise force. The invader relied upon overwhelming aggression, attempting to drive its opponent backward through sheer violence. Minutes passed as the battle shifted across the valley. Ancient trees snapped like dry branches whenever one of the giants collided with them. Massive stones rolled down nearby slopes after being shaken loose by the relentless impacts. Suddenly several smaller predators emerged from the forest surrounding the valley. Instead of attacking the battling giants, they rushed toward the frightened herbivores gathered near the lake. Kale immediately understood the invaders' strategy. The great predator had not come alone. While it distracted the guardian, its followers intended to slaughter the defenseless herds. Without waiting for orders, Kale turned toward Nara and the other hunters. They could not challenge the enormous monsters, but they could protect the peaceful animals that formed the foundation of the valley's delicate balance. The expedition hurried down the rocky hillside, shouting loudly while waving burning branches taken from hastily lit torches. Their sudden appearance startled the smaller predators. Spears flew through the air, striking the ground before the advancing hunters and forcing them to hesitate. Human voices echoed across the valley, creating confusion among the attackers. The herbivores seized the opportunity to move deeper into the open grasslands where their immense numbers made them far more difficult to isolate. Several of the smaller predators attempted to circle behind the humans, but Nara organized the hunters into a tight defensive line, ensuring that no one became separated. Every person understood that cooperation offered their only chance of survival. While the humans defended the herd, the battle between the two giants reached its climax. The invading predator launched one final desperate charge. Roaring with all its remaining strength, the guardian sidestepped at the last possible moment before delivering a devastating blow with its powerful tail. The attacker lost its balance and crashed heavily against a towering rock formation. Before it could recover, the guardian placed one enormous foot upon its rival's chest and released a thunderous roar that echoed across every mountain surrounding the valley. The defeated predator struggled briefly before lowering its head in surrender. Rather than delivering a fatal bite, the guardian slowly stepped away. Bruised and exhausted, the invader rose unsteadily and retreated toward the northern pass, followed by the surviving members of its hunting pack. Silence gradually returned as the defeated animals disappeared into the distant mist. Kale stood motionless, overwhelmed by what he had witnessed. The guardian had possessed every opportunity to kill its enemy but had chosen mercy instead. It had fought only to defend the valley, not to conquer it. As the peaceful herd slowly returned to the lakeshore, the giant protector turned toward the humans once more. This time it neither roared nor displayed aggression. It simply watched Kale with calm, thoughtful eyes before lowering its massive head ever so slightly, almost as if acknowledging the courage the humans had shown in protecting the helpless creatures during the battle. In that unforgettable moment Kale realized that the greatest lesson of the dinosaur age was not that the strongest always survived, but that true strength belonged to those who protected the balance of life rather than destroying it. The hidden valley slowly returned to its peaceful rhythm after the battle. The frightened herbivores resumed feeding along the lakeshore, birds settled once again upon the branches of towering trees, and the gentle sound of flowing water replaced the echoes of roaring giants. The guardian remained beside the lake for several minutes, breathing heavily as fresh blood trickled from wounds across its massive body. Although victorious, it had paid a high price to defend the valley. Kale watched with quiet respect, realizing that even the greatest creature in the ancient world could not escape pain or sacrifice. Strength did not remove suffering. It only allowed one to endure it. The giant predator slowly walked toward the deepest part of the lake, where cool water washed over its injured legs and carried away the blood that stained its dark scales. Smaller birds landed upon its back without fear, carefully removing parasites from between the rough plates covering its skin. The enormous animal remained perfectly still, allowing the tiny creatures to perform their work. Cale smiled as he recognized another example of nature's remarkable balance. Even the mightiest hunter depended upon the smallest forms of life. Nothing in the ancient world truly survived alone. Nara approached Cale and quietly admitted that she had spent her entire life believing every great predator existed only to kill. What she had witnessed had changed that belief forever. The Guardian had defended countless peaceful animals, driven away an invader without unnecessary cruelty, and ignored the vulnerable humans standing only a short distance away. The old stories, once dismissed as simple legends, suddenly seemed far more believable. Doran stepped forward and pointed toward the distant mountains. He explained that every generation had preserved fragments of wisdom, but over time fear had transformed many truths into myths. People remembered the monsters yet forgot the guardians. They remembered destruction but overlooked the balance that allowed life to continue through countless ages. The expedition spent the remainder of the day exploring the hidden valley with great care. They discovered rare medicinal plants growing near the lakeshore, crystal springs flowing from beneath ancient cliffs, and fertile soil unlike anything found in the surrounding lands. Large herbivores grazed peacefully beside much smaller species without conflict. Even scavengers waited patiently until natural opportunities appeared rather than stealing from one another. Every observation strengthened Cale's belief that the valley existed as a unique sanctuary where the natural order remained undisturbed. As evening approached, the Guardian climbed a rocky hill overlooking the valley. For a long time it simply watched the horizon, as though standing eternal watch over every living creature below. Then it disappeared beyond the cliffs without another sound. No one attempted to follow. Some mysteries deserved respect more than explanation. The following morning the expedition began its journey back toward the two tribes. The return felt different from the climb into the mountains. Fear no longer guided every step. Instead, the travelers carried knowledge that would reshape the future of their people. Along the way they noticed fresh signs that predator activity had already begun to decrease. Smaller hunting packs moved south instead of gathering in the mountains. Herbivore trails once again spread across the valleys in familiar patterns. Even the forests seemed calmer, filled with birdsong that had been absent for many days. It appeared that the defeat of the invading giant had restored order to the surrounding wilderness. When the travelers finally reached the riverside village, both tribes gathered eagerly to hear their story. Cale described everything they had witnessed without exaggeration, speaking not only of the great battle but also of the peaceful valley, the cooperation among animals, and the Guardian's unexpected mercy. Some listeners struggled to believe such an extraordinary tale, while others recognized pieces of forgotten tradition hidden within his words. The elders agreed that the knowledge must never be lost again. They decided to teach future generations that humans were not rulers of the ancient world but participants within it, responsible for protecting balance whenever possible. That night the villages celebrated not with loud victory songs but with quiet gratitude. Families shared food around large fires while storytellers began preserving the events in memory so that children yet unborn would understand the lessons learned in the mountains. As Cale gazed toward the distant northern peaks glowing beneath the stars, he wondered whether he would ever see the silent Guardian again. Deep inside he sensed that their paths were not yet finished crossing, because nature always found new ways to test those entrusted with its oldest secrets. Many seasons passed after the journey to the hidden valley, and life gradually found a new rhythm. The great migrations returned to their familiar paths, rivers once again filled with fish during the warm months, and the terrifying attacks that had haunted both tribes became increasingly rare. The forests remained wild and unpredictable, but they no longer felt consumed by the strange unrest that had spread across the land. Kale and Nara often traveled between their villages, strengthening the friendship that had been born during the expedition. Together the two tribes exchanged knowledge about hunting, fishing, medicine, and survival. New shelters were built on safer ground, watchtowers overlooked important valleys. And young hunters were taught that patience and observation were more valuable than reckless courage. The children who listened to the stories of the hidden valley grew up believing that wisdom should always guide strength. Every lesson learned from the guardian became part of their way of life. They respected the great herbivores because they nourished countless other creatures. They feared the powerful carnivores without hating them because predators also belonged to the natural order. They gathered only what they needed from the forests and rivers, understanding that taking more than necessary would weaken the balance upon which everyone depended. The elders often reminded the younger generations that humans were among the smallest beings living in that ancient world. Yet they possessed something unique. They could remember the past, learn from mistakes, and choose compassion instead of violence. Those abilities allowed even fragile people to shape the future in ways that strength alone never could. Years later Kale returned alone to the northern mountains, hoping to see the hidden valley once more. The climb felt strangely familiar, and every stone along the path awakened memories of the extraordinary journey that had changed his life. When he finally reached the valley, he found it as peaceful as before. Giant herbivores grazed beside the crystal lake, birds circled above the ancient cliffs, and colorful flowers covered the meadows where fierce battles had once taken place. The valley seemed untouched by time itself. Kale waited quietly beside the water until sunset without expecting anything. Just as the last golden light disappeared beyond the mountains, the guardian emerged from the forest. It moved with the same calm confidence, though new scars crossed its massive body, silent reminders that the responsibility of protecting the valley had never ended. The giant predator stopped several steps away and looked directly at Kale. Neither human nor dinosaur showed fear. They simply observed one another in complete silence. After a long moment the guardian slowly turned toward the mountains and disappeared into the fading light exactly as it had years before. Kale smiled because he finally understood that some bonds required no words. Respect alone could unite beings separated by size, strength, and instinct. When Kale returned to his people, he devoted the rest of his life to preserving every lesson he had learned. Around countless evening fires he described the beauty of the ancient forests, the endless rivers, the towering dinosaurs, the hidden valley, and the silent guardian that had protected life instead of ruling it. Parents repeated those stories to their children, and those children one day shared them with their own families. Generation after generation, the memories survived long after the people who had witnessed the events were gone. Time continued moving forward. Mountains slowly changed their shape. Rivers carved new valleys. Entire forests disappeared while others grew in their place. The mighty dinosaurs that had once dominated the earth eventually vanished, leaving behind only bones buried beneath layers of stone and the silent echoes of an age beyond imagination. Humanity continued its own journey, building villages, cities, kingdoms, and civilizations that could scarcely imagine the ancient world from which they had come. Yet deep within every story about courage, respect, sacrifice, and the balance of nature, a small piece of that forgotten age remained alive. Whether the tale of Kale and the Guardian was history, legend, or something in between no longer mattered. Its true value was the lesson it carried across countless generations. Every living creature shares the same world. Power without wisdom leads only to destruction. Courage without compassion becomes cruelty. The greatest victories are not won by those who conquer nature but by those who learn to live in harmony with it. Long after the last roar faded from the valleys and the final footprint disappeared beneath the earth, that truth endured, becoming the greatest legacy of the dinosaur age.